Value and surplus value briefly explained. It is shown what is wrong with the classical representation of surplus value in Karl Marx and in many of his interpreters, and how the surplus value really comes about. According to Marx, the labor forces also produce values and surplus values within the framework of commodity production. An entrepreneur incurs costs for production, premises, raw materials, electricity, water, standard components, tools, machines, communication, consumables, etc. Marx calls these costs constant capital C. She needs labor forces for production. According to Marx, only humans are labor forces. Each worker has to work a certain number of hours for the entrepreneur. This is the total working time. But according to Marx, the entrepreneur pays each worker only for a part of this working time. This is referred to as the paid or necessary working time, paid as V. In the other part of the total working time, the unpaid part, the worker works for the entrepreneur free of charge. The entrepreneur appropriates the unpaid wages as surplus value S without compensation to the workers. In this way, she receives more from the production of the work products than she had to spend on their production and provision. Marx recorded the process of value formation in his well-known value formula W equals C plus V plus S. That means the value is formed from the costs C and V and the surplus value S. According to Marx, the workers objectify with their work their rights to means of subsistence in the work products as value. For Marx, only the production side of the commodity society is important for value formation, but not the market. Probably for this reason, among other things, he applies the value formula to the production side of the commodity society. The entrepreneur only incurs costs with the production. In the example of this video, this is, proportionally per work product, 300 euros for the constant capital and 100 euros for the variable capital, that means for the necessary working time of the workers. Based on her company goals and her market observation, the entrepreneur sets herself the goal of generating 50 euros surplus value for each work product. According to Marx, surplus value arises from the unpaid working time. But on the production side of the commodity society, there is initially neither this nor the necessary working time, because necessary means socially average necessary. Before the products are sold, there is only a private working time that is paid as total working time. The entrepreneur can only determine to what extent a surplus value can probably be realized, and thus how large the proportion of unpaid working time could be. But such a surplus value is not a real one, but only an expected one. Among other things, because surplus value is part of value, there can only be an expected value on the production side. Let's look at the businesswomen's credit card movements. She has got expenses of 400 euros and expects 50 euros surplus value. Even if she would not pay the workers and the production would cost her only 300 euros, someone would have to spend her 350 euros so that she would receive 50 euros surplus value under these conditions, but nobody would do that. The surplus value is the goal of capitalist production. An entrepreneur wants to generate more income by selling her products than she has spent on their production and provision. The entrepreneur links her expenses for all work products and the surplus value she expects proportionately with each work product as an offer price, and thus she brings them to the market. In this example, the offer price is 450 euros. This reflects the expected value for the product. There is a buyer on the market who completely reimburses the entrepreneur for the C and V costs and also pays the expected 50 euros more, namely 450 euros. This 450 euros corresponds to the real value of this product. The value equivalent of the buyer is composed of the cost reimbursement of 400 euros for C and V, which in this case will be completely replaced with it, and the additionally paid surplus value of 50 euros. The term surplus value means that this value is above a value below, here referred to as the base value. The base value corresponds to the value equivalent up to a maximum of the costs C and V. For the value forming, it is crucial that the surplus value is added to the base value and thus to the replacement of the production costs, and not directly to the production costs. This applies to both the amount of the total value and the place of the value formation. Nobody in her company pays her the additional 50 euros, the surplus value. The buyer donates the surplus value because, in his opinion, the workers designed the product so well that he buys it on these terms. This surplus value can be used to calculate the unpaid working hours for precisely this product after the product has been sold. The base value and surplus value are only formed on the market, since the production costs are only replaced on the market and the surplus value is only paid there. The value is assigned to both the commodity and the value equivalent. The allocation is made in parallel by both exchange partners in the same amount, according to the purchase contract or the invoice. Both the buyer and the seller can have value ideas that differ from this common value, but only the common value as agreed in the sales contract or the invoice is socially relevant. The value primarily reflects the recognition of expenses, or, in other words, only the paid expenses. Only these paid expenses, i.e. the real values, should in turn be included in the means of subsistence of the labor forces. In other words, if a car manufacturer cannot sell 10,000 manufactured cars, not the expected values of these cars should be included as real values in the total scope of all goods to be distributed economically, and thus into the values or means of subsistence of the labor forces. Desired values have no place in it. Finally, different situations of the base value forming and the surplus value payment are considered. Situation A. The buyer fully reimburses the expenses and additionally pays the expected surplus value. This situation corresponds to the example shown above. A base value of 400 euros is formed and a surplus value of 50 euros is paid. Here the total value as the sum of base value and surplus value is 450 euros. Situation B. The entrepreneur only succeeds in getting the buyer to reimburse the costs C and V, but not to make a surplus value payment. The base value is thus also formed in the amount of 400 euros, but the surplus value is now 0 euro. The real value is therefore only formed in the amount of 400 euros. There are no unpaid working hours. The entire working hours were necessary to manufacture and provide this product. Situation C. With the sale of the product, the entrepreneur does not even succeed in getting the C and V reimbursed. A surplus value payment is out of the question. The buyer only pays 300 euros for the drone. The base value is only formed in the amount of the value equivalent of 300 euros. The entrepreneur is left with 100 euros costs. She has to forego any surplus value. Only 3/4 of the total working time was necessary working time. That means socially useful and thus value-creating working time. That corresponds to 300 euros instead of the expected 400 euros. 1/4 of the total working time remains as private, not socially useful, and therefore not value-creating working time. The entrepreneur gives away the result of this share in a non-economic way with the sale of the drone. Situation D. Nobody buys the work product. No buyer recognizes the work involved as useful. No expenses, that means costs, will be reimbursed. As a result, there is no underlying base value and consequently no surplus value. The work product remains the property of the entrepreneur. The work carried out on the product retains the status of private and non-value creating. The value of a labor product is consequently not created in production, but rather formed on the market. Conclusion.